We are doing a redo here because I've invited Deb Gran back. Deb and I had this conversation, I don't know, Deb, 6, 9 months ago.
Yeah, quite a
Um,
while.
and our live streaming didn't work.
Mhm.
So apparently we were supposed to do it again when we could wear
Matching shirt.
show up as twins. Um,
Exactly.
Deb, if you would. So Deb and I have it's probably been 5, 6 years, Deb,
Mhm.
in a couple of different organizations. You've brought Moxie in, and from the very first conversation I had with Deb, I was struck by what both an innovative and grounded HR leader she is,
Mm.
in terms of always being willing to think about what's next and always grounding in how people are the core of an organization's success. And you're so far from the compliance based HR leader of the past.
Mhm.
I'll let you introduce yourself, and then I want to dig in because we just have so much to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's always a pleasure having a conversation with you. So, if this one doesn't go live, we'll just do it again. From that perspective. And we have worked together for a good couple of years at a couple of different companies. It's interesting. I will tell you that I think I started out as that HR compliance person because that's where many of us start, right? In helping organizations be compliant in certain areas, but as my HR career grew and I started to work with direct businesses is when I think I started really adapting into more of what do we really need to do to get out of that HR policing and be that partner and, kind of carry us through as well. So, as you know, I'm the corporate vice president for Diasorin North America right now. Been with the company about 2 years. Prior to that, I was the senior vice president for Amplifone Americas. And part of that, I was with a company called SoftMed Systems that also became part of the 3M organization. So I've had a pretty long run in HR. It's been my entire career. And I have worked for small companies that have been, purchased by big companies, and I've worked for international companies. The last two organizations I've worked with have been Italian owned, so I've had global experience working with them as well.
Which is always interesting
Mhm.
when you're at. So let's talk about. I know that you were just featured in Redefining HR, Lars Schmidt's book that's out.
Mhm.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised that you were one of the leaders that he decided to feature. So let's talk about that.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was an honor to be one of the people that was selected to do a highlight in his book. I think his book is amazing. I've read it several times because it's full of anecdotes and stories from a lot of all different HR leaders. And I think any one of us who are building our HR careers or are managing in an organization can relate to some of the stories that are in there. So I think his approach was very necessary and it's a great learning experience. Beyond that, I think it's a great book for CEOs who really want to maybe better understand how to partner with HR or what that HR leader can really do for them. So, I was very proud to be part of it. I have that sitting on the shelf in my home office, and it's a reminder of all the great people that I've worked with in HR over the years, and the business leaders that I've worked with that I've learned from.
Well, and I think seeing your shift, right, from sort of that compliance space to now, how do you unleash the potential of every person in your organization, right? So from let's make sure we check all the boxes to let's think about diversity and equity and inclusion in our people practices as well. And your HR team was named best of, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that I've appreciated is, and depending on different organizations, sometimes there's no DEI function and it lives in the organization, which is what I love.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's driven top bottom. In Diasorin, what you all have done is sort of led from both. Where I've seen you say, let's take a look at some of our talent acquisition practices and some
Mhm.
things that we've done and interrupting bias there, all the way through how do we help everybody understand their role in inclusion. So let's just talk about some of the things that you're doing there. Do you want to start with talent acquisition?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think sometimes that's nothing's easy, right? But it's the beginning
Very
of
easy. This would be fixed.
right, right. But talent acquisition is the beginning of almost every experience that you will have as a candidate and then ultimately an employee. So, and it touches not just HR, it's the hiring manager, it's the peers of this individual as well. So in 2019, we really started to take a step back in the HR organization to say, what do we need to do differently just from an experience perspective? And, part of our challenge was also the environments of where we are situated in our Minnesota location. And, for example, we are, further out from the city. We are closer to Minnesota, Wisconsin border. So we miss out on a very big population of people who don't necessarily want to drive, to the location that we're in. And then our office in, the Los Angeles area, they have the traffic issue. So, we have that standing in our way sometimes of really reaching candidates. So we really started to look at, how we were doing recruitment, overall. At the same time, we started to have some more conversations with you about what are some of the things that we can do to not only increase the candidate pool, but how are we going to make sure that we're bringing candidates in and having a fantastic experience and making sure that we are looking at things from a diversity and inclusion perspective and making those things, as regular, as possible. So we really took the approach of what can we do from a candidate perspective? Can we have blind resumes? Can we make sure that there are, dual interviews at least that are happening, most often? So we've taken a step back and implemented some things that, helped us create just a little bit different experience. The blind candidates, and resumes whenever possible. Obviously, that's different when it's an internal referral. But just making sure that people are looking at each candidate with a clean slate. And then our dual interview process, I think, has taken us a long way. It gives an opportunity for, usually I sit in with the interviews with our president and other executives. It's an opportunity to hear two different approaches from our organization, share a little bit about, who we are, and, really help each other build a really great interviewing experience. And at the end, then we sat in and we saw the same thing. So we can have that really strong conversation about why that person is or isn't, the right candidate for this particular position. So I think just doing some of those things have really helped open our own eyes in the HR and the TA team, but also integrate that into the conversations that we have with our hiring managers and our hiring leaders as well.
Well, and what I heard, Deb, is you're creating consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes if we have, we know that unconscious bias is going to creep in if we've got,
Yeah.
if we don't have that consistency in the process. I also love, and I know that you haven't mentioned it, but I know that you've invested in making sure that everybody that touches that cycle has an understanding of unconscious bias and how to
Mm-hmm.
interrupt it in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's not
Absolutely.
just, I look back, Deb, I think about this. I was like 23, 24. My company would send me out and say, yeah, no, go to this campus and do these interviews. We had no training. We had
Mm-hmm.
no, we could ask whatever we wanted.
Yeah.
Talk about a flawed process.
Right. Right.
So I love that and that you continue to hone on what you've done.
Right.
The
And
other,
that's not just for us locally, just so you know. I think some of when we look at our hiring practice and some of the training materials that have been put in place, that's from a global perspective. So even though, North America is where I focus, the training materials that we've looked at and we've helped develop have been part of a bigger picture. So the organization as a whole wants to make sure that we're using every opportunity to be consistent, to hire the right individuals as well. And then we certainly, implement it on our end. So it's been an opportunity for us to have a strong voice globally in the preparation of that, but then also share a similar message amongst all of the people who are involved in the process.
right. And again, back to that consistency.
Mhm.
What is this experience like, whether you're in Italy or whether you're
Right.
here or, whether you're in Minnesota, whether you're in LA?
Mhm.
One of the things that I appreciate and you knew this from the start. We've always said we won't just do what is unconscious bias, and we won't just talk about unconscious bias in hiring, because you can't then put people into workplaces that are toxic.
Mhm.
And I appreciate some of the things that you've been doing. And again, you've always, from our first conversation, it was, what's the 5-year strategy for this versus, can you come in and deliver this training and then we're done?
Mhm.
Um, it was, how does any training fit with a strategy that's long term, that gets to that core, what's my everyday experience as an employee? So
Yeah.
talk about some of the things that you're doing on the other end of the spectrum, right? So we always say that recruiting
Mhm.
and interviewing is tip of the spear. Okay, now what is it like when I show up every day at your organization?
Yeah, I can tell you a couple things, and I will also tell you that there's a lot that we're not doing right yet, which you and I have talked about as well. But I think, to start with, the recruiting process obviously was the first thing, but organizationally, we spent time with your organization, the HR team, the TA team, for us to really better recognize unconscious bias ourselves, since many times people come to HR, they think we know everything, right? And that we're going to be able to teach everyone. But if we don't start working on it for ourselves, there's no way we can help engage in that conversation within the organization. And then we expanded that similar learning experience for the rest of the organization. And I'm the first to say that a learning experience is one event. It's what you do with it and how you can continue to reinforce it and have the conversation, and in the conversations that you and I have had, we've always said it's all about the conversation and what comes next. And so within each of our organizations, we did spend more time with our senior management team, because again, they're the leaders of the organization. We want them to be comfortable and uncomfortable,
Yep.
and learn how each of us are going to deal with that. So beyond the standard training and initiatives, there's been some ongoing discussions that's led by the local HR directors. We've also tried to take some bits and pieces that might seem, a little bit easier, but again, help along the way, which is we use LinkedIn Learning for a lot of our learning events for our employees, and we've put together clusters of training that, number one, all of the managers and leaders have taken first, and then we then push that out to our employees. Again, really just to start to develop that internal conversation, because if we can't have the conversation, and I know personally, I know how uncomfortable it is to have the conversation. I've made no bones about the fact that I have to check my privilege every single day. I know that I am an older white privileged lady, and I have to remind myself of that every day so that I can think differently as an HR leader. And believe me, I don't walk around always reminding myself of that. So I have to get checked, as well. And I can give you some examples of getting checked, but
I would say
yeah.
that piece is so important, because we're all on this journey. We're
Hmm.
all going to make mistakes, but it's how are we questioning ourselves, right? We
Yeah.
talk about that inclusion superpower of,
Yeah.
what's my privilege here? What do I need to be doing? What are the mistakes? And
Yeah.
I really, you know, again, it is about the daily, what happens, what's the conversation, and what do
Mhm.
you do after the mistake?
Yeah. And also the transition from personal life to professional life, because I think for me, and maybe others as well, I always thought I had it more, I was more in check when I think of my personal life. I have more open conversations, with friends and family, and I realized that for me, privilege does not mean that I didn't work hard to get where I was at. I grew up very poor, right? So it wasn't that I had a silver spoon in my mouth. I know that that's not what white privilege is. It's for me that I have, two white sons, and I've never had to worry about them driving at night and getting stopped, and what their response is going to be. But I have a sister-in-law who has had to have that experience, and you know I understand, that. But sometimes when, especially as an HR person, I think you then walk into your place of business, and you have to wear a business hat, of course. But for me, that personally stopped me from thinking a little bit
Mhm.
about how comfortable I felt externally having those conversations. And now I'm feeling a little bit like I'm not. And it wasn't any of the companies that I've worked at that did that. It was me. I
Yeah.
have this vision of, okay, I'm the VP of HR. I need to be appropriate. I need to be this. And, what I have found is, the more I'm, number one, recognizing and saying, I know this is who I am. And so I'm coming at it from this angle and I'm trying to understand, even when I ask a stupid question, most people are appreciative, or at least they're telling me they are. Um, and also, recognizing that, I don't live the same life everybody else lives. And I have to try to understand it as best I can, and I have to listen and help, lead the way. So I can be a facilitator of things, but I'm not the owner of it.
Yeah.
And
And that
trying to move forward with things.
it's okay if it's messy.
It is, and it is,
It's gonna be
you
messy.
warned me. You warned me 5 years ago. There's nothing easy about this, right?
Yeah.
And I think the more you do, the more difficult it gets. I think sometimes it's getting started, and I think I shared this with you on our last call, which was sometimes there's just I don't know what to do next, right? Because I'm so worried about offending somebody that I get a little stuck, or organizations get a little stuck. So I was really happy when the organization that I work with today, the team and the leaders embraced what do we need to do next. And now I think we're at a point where it's okay, we've done some of those nicety things and we've recognized it. Now, how do we move to the next level? So we are really reaching out more to our employee base to say, we've got some external companies who are helping us formulate what this plan looks like. We've got a template, but I don't want it to be, Deb Gran's template, or the HR department template. We want to get, feedback, and we've gotten some good feedback on some of the things that we've done. But I've also gotten some feedback on, why didn't you do something? And as difficult as it is to sometimes get out there and say, you know what, I didn't do something and it was wrong. Deep down, I'm really happy that somebody called me on it,
Yes.
and it's painful.
That's progress,
Yeah, it,
right?
it really is, because I think if somebody is willing to say something to the VP of HR, number one, that tells me that other people are obviously having that same conversation, because not everybody's that brave, right?
Right,
To come
right.
and say something. And I have to listen to that, I think that that's really important, to be able to balance that, listen, and when I make a mistake, say I make a mistake, and hopefully people understand that, and will over time understand that I'm being genuine when I say that, and that we continue to move forward in positive manners.
Right. Well, and modeling that, right?
Mhm.
I heard
Sometimes
you,
it's just time.
right? I
You
heard
just
you. I
need it.
learned we're going to do better, right?
Yeah.
And here's what's next. Because again, this is so iterative.
Hmm.
What's next? What's next? Right? Do the next right thing. Do the
Yeah.
next right thing, and stumble along the way, and give up
Hmm.
the privilege of comfort,
Yeah.
um, right?
Yeah.
And get in, because worrying about saying the wrong thing is one level of comfort. Being
Hmm.
in a workplace where you feel excluded
Yeah.
or ongoing microaggressions, that's a whole different level,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. So my motto really is, it's all about the conversation. And if the conversation that you're having with me or I'm having with you is making you uncomfortable, let's talk about that. And let's create an environment where it can and would be, acceptable. There are times when some things just do have to be said, and whether it's me saying it or somebody saying it to me. And I can tell you, my experience has been, especially over the past year, that when anybody's come to me to say, anything that they've either been disappointed or they wanted to hear it differently, they've shown me such respect in the way that it's been said, to me, that I can't imagine it being done any other way. And what a tremendous gift and learning lesson, for me to be able to take that information and do something with it.
well, and I think that sort of imbues everything that you do, this growth mindset,
Hmm.
of just sort of leaning into the mess and leaning into the growth and leaning into this consistent, how do we do it a little bit better? How do we do it a
Yeah.
little bit better? I think sometimes we think it's got to be a whole scale, everything. Let's burn everything down and start
Yeah.
again. And so much of this work is the incremental next.
especially in an environment like, 2020 for every company, right? Regardless of what your business was in, I didn't talk to anybody this past year that wasn't running crazy, doing something, as it relates to people, balancing. So, business is like this all the time. And 2020, it was even more so. And so sometimes I think, in conversations I've had with other HR professionals as well, that if we own it, then we have to put the box and the parameter around it and just roll out something really beautiful, right?
Mhm.
Well, there's no way in heck that can happen. None of us have time anymore.
Yeah.
We don't have the luxury, especially at, certain company sizes, to have somebody fully dedicated to this. And so part of that is, us as HR leaders, if it's going to fall at least in our purview to start with, that we have to be comfortable asking people to help us,
Yeah.
and know that that's bringing them into our world, that sometimes HR, that makes us a little uncomfortable, right? But what a better way for us to really embrace things and better understand and do things. So I feel like anybody who's made some progress in any one of the programs or the conversations that they've had this past year, they've probably put some tremendous thought and effort to it, because it's doing anything this past year has been, a real challenge outside of just, getting regular work done and people balancing their home lives and everything else that's happened as well.
Well, and we know the old way wasn't working either.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so everything got, we talked about sometimes you have to burn, you think you
You
have to
got
burn
it.
everything to, well,
Yep,
circumstances really did just say work looks different.
yep, yes.
And how can we build this back in a more inclusive way? Such an opportunity to, and
Mhm,
again, to sort of lean into the mess of it and to be willing to let go. I've been talking with the Moxie team a lot. We're experiencing growth, and I said, you hit a point in every organization that it's a wind tunnel where you
mhm.
have to literally let go of the way you've done everything in the past because it doesn't serve you anymore.
Anymore. Mhm.
And think about, okay, what serves us now? What serves us as a team now? What serves our clients now? And to, again, be willing to let go and to embrace change, which most people don't love.
Right, right. Yeah, we've gone through, especially for our group in Minnesota, one of the things that is so fantastic about our Minnesota location is that we have longevity in our employees. We have many employees that this is the only company that they've ever worked for. And that's, something that companies today just can't really boast about, right? But it's something that we are very proud of. At the same time, that makes it very challenging for new people to come into the organization, because there's so many unwritten rules that are
Yeah.
in people's heads, right? So even just the onboarding process of making somebody feel welcome and understanding how to get something done. Many of the hiring managers have been having those conversations with their HR business partners about what can we do differently.
Mhm.
So that's change right there.
You know what?
Of
That makes me think about, I had if folks want to go back and watch, I had a conversation with Madeline Borkin of I4CP.
Mhm.
And one of the things, and they do a lot of research, best practices. One of the things that they have figured out is sort of a next practice, Deb, is when somebody comes in, very, very intentionally connecting them and having them understand the influence networks in an organization.
Yeah.
But instead of, because if I'm from an underrepresented group,
Mhm.
whether let's say that's a class, right? I don't know how that might work,
Mhm.
or I don't know how things are done around here. Well, don't leave it to that person to figure that out.
Right.
Tap them right in.
Right. And you can't have everything written in a manual either, right?
No, that's never.
Because
That's never. Let's talk about,
yeah,
like, the influence map in an organization is not going to show up in a manual.
exactly. Exactly. So it's really having that, we're in the process of building something very similar. We had many years ago on a program called an Amica program, which is buddy, in Italian. And we are reflushing that right now to kind of include this, which is how do we get new individuals connected with the right internal individuals that will have those, off the cuff conversations, the unwritten rules, how do we get things done here, and then help build, further, our culture in the organization as well. That to me is a huge step for, this side of the organization. Like I said, we have fabulous people who've worked here for a long time, but we also are growing. So we have new people coming in, and so how do we embrace that, and really transfer that knowledge as best possible?
Well, and it's interesting. That's one of the inclusion nudges that we have in here for
Mhm.
teams. It's, for the new person,
Yep.
don't make them walk in and be the new kid at school. Like,
Right.
who am I going to
Who
sit
do
at
I
the
get to sit
table?
with?
Right. Instead,
Yep.
who is that person? Right. And so that they
Yeah.
get integrated really quickly into the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, we are implementing the Everyday Inclusion app with our employees in the month of April. So we are hoping to use that as, for a couple of reasons. Number one, just because it has a fantastic daily reminder in there, and how better not to, raise our own awareness every single day, but also the tools that are within the app. Are things that a team can use, an individual can use, and we can use from an HR or learning department to help push out to the employees as well. So we think it's going to be a great tool for
Yeah.
us. So
Yeah. We're super excited. And again, it's part of this roadmap that you've
yeah,
had, which I love.
yep.
Okay. Leave me with one last truth bomb, Deb,
Mhm.
about all the work and HR's role in building a diverse and inclusive organization. Or might
Yeah.
not have to do with that. Whatever you want your truth bomb to be about.
Well, for me, the truth bomb really is that, many times it's always, inclusion starts at the top and it's top down, or somebody has to take a stand. And, I've got fabulous leaders. I have people who, have, made strong comments and commitments to the organization, but it's not just there. And it's also not, just grassroots, because I think that, sometimes grassroots, depending on the size of the company, especially, are not embraced as much as they could or should be, right? And so it has to be this continual influx throughout the entire organization. And where I find, in many organizations that are so, of such a size where you don't have, a separate, chief officer to focus strictly on, inclusion and diversity. Many times that does fall in the HR bucket. And what we have to make sure is that we don't own it. We help facilitate, we help build, we increase our own knowledge and so forth. But how do you then make sure that it's integrated through the organization? And I think if I could leave you with one last piece, it's, as you've always said, it's a journey, it's uncomfortable, it's fantastic, and it's something that can really help an organization continue to build, their culture, whatever that culture might be, is, making sure that each and every employee can come to work and feel like themselves. That is my goal. And I'm sure that's many people's goals in most organizations. It's just, how do we make that happen? And I know it's a journey. It's not overnight. And, we've got some bumps along the way, and we'll continue to have some bumps. And when you and I have a conversation again next year, hopefully we will made a little bit of a dent in getting closer to that.
Well, and I think there's what a worthy pursuit.
Mhm, mhm.
What a worthy
Absolutely.
pursuit. So, Deb, I knew this was going to be great. Thank you so much for joining me.
It was a pleasure talking with you again. I really appreciate it.
All right. Everybody, we will see you. Actually, we're having a conversation tomorrow
Mhm.
with Hollaback on bystander intervention with
Nice.
everything that's been happening. And we're going to talk about that both from outside the workplace and in the workplace. So, hope you can join us tomorrow. Thanks,
Great
everybody.
conversation. Thank you.